SGLT2 inhibitor has increased or expanded the horizons for SGLT2 inhibitor use. So we have Dr. Kapil who will be speaking on EMPA kidney trial. I would like to hand over the proceedings to Dr. Piyush.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. I welcome all of you. I would like to take pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kapil Sejpal. He has done his MD Medicine from BJ Medical College, Pune, and DM Nephrology from JIPMER. His current affiliation are Assistant Professor at Department of Nephrology at Datta Mekhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Vadodara. I would like to invite our chairpersons, Dr. Monali Sahu and Dr. Manoj. I would further handle the proceedings to our chairpersons.
Thank you. So let's hear from Kapil about this EMPA kidney trial, and I think it is a great upcoming drug now that needs to be used by everyone. We will be happy to hear about, if anything, negative about the drug.
Good evening, everyone. I thank TNS for giving us the opportunity to talk about this topic today. So let us begin with the study. As we know that worldwide the majority of patients with CKD have lower levels of albuminuria. That is a albumin ratio of less than 300 and do not have diabetes. When we see the trials like DAPA-CKD, it showed benefits with respect to kidney failure in patients also who were not diabetic. But that trial included patients only with proteinuria. So there is limited data on patients with an eGFR of less than 30 ml, and this also may vary among populations with CKD. So these are the two main trials which looked into the role of SGLT2 and the CKD progression. First was Cadence trial, which was published in 2019. It included patients with diabetes and proteinuria both, and it showed a significant reduction in the risk of composite of ESRD and cardiovascular death. Then came DAPA-CKD. The main difference between DAPA-CKD and Cadence trial was the DAPA-CKD enrolled patients even without diabetes, but both the trials required patients to have proteinuria. So today we will be discussing EMPA kidney trial, which included patients with lower GFR and which did not require proteinuria as an inclusion criteria. And also the GFR cutoff was lower in EMPA kidney trial as compared to DAPA-CKD and Cadence trial. So this was an international trial including 241 centers in 8 countries with representation from Asia as well. And it was designed to assess the efficacy of once daily empagliflozin treatment on the progression of kidney disease and cardiovascular disease, and also to examine the safety profile of this drug. And this trial aimed to include large number of patients without diabetes, patients with eGFR less than 30, and patients with lower level of proteinuria. Coming to the inclusion criteria, the inclusion criteria was adults with a raised adjusted eGFR of less than 20, of at least 20, but less than 45, regardless of the level of albuminuria, or patients with an eGFR of more than 45 up to 90 with the albumin to create ratio of more than 200 at the screening visit. and all these patients were required to have a stable single RAS inhibitor prescription. But if an investigator judged that a RAS inhibitor was not indicated or would not be tolerated, those patients also were included in the trial. And also patients with or without diabetes were eligible. Exclusion criteria included currently patients already on SGLT2 inhibitors, diabetes mellitus type 2 with and prior atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease with EGFR more than 60, patients receiving dual RAS blockade, patients on maintenance dialysis, patients with a functioning kidney graft or scheduled for kidney transplantation, patients with polycystic kidney disease, patients scheduled for periodic surgery, ketoacidosis in the last 5 years, symptomatic hypertension, ALT or AST more than 3 times upper normal limit at screening, and history of hypersensitivity to empagliflozin or other SGLT2 inhibitors. Patients with any immunosuppressive medication in the last 3 months except prednisolone less than or equal to 10 milligram, or medical history that might limit the individual's ability to take treatment for the duration of the study, which includes severe respiratory disease, history of cancer, other non-melanoma skin cancer, or recent history of alcohol or substance abuse. And last, current pregnancy, lactation, or women of childbearing potential, unless using highly effective contraception. So this was the study design in short. It compared empagliflozin versus matching placebo. Inclusion criteria: more than 20 GFR less than 45, irrespective of the proteinuria, irrespective of diabetic status of the patient, or more than 45 or less than 90 with urine albumin create ratio of more than 200. We will come to the outcomes in separate slide. The total number of population in the study was 6,609. Mean age was 64. 67% were male and 33% patients were female. And it included 8 countries, mainly from Europe, North America, and Asia. All eligible patients entered a pre-randomization running phase where 15 weeks supply of once daily placebo tablets were given. The local investigators reviewed the data, assessed RAS inhibitor use, and approved potential patients for later randomization. After the patient had completed 6 weeks of running phase, blood and urine specimens were collected for central analysis. Patients are randomly assigned to receive empagliflozin or matching placebo. Randomization was performed with the use of a minimization process with a 10% stochastic element. At each follow-up visit, patients provided information on their kidney status, adherence to the assigned trial regimen, and details of concomitant medication use. They were also asked about any serious adverse events, and they underwent clinical assessment of blood pressure and weight and had blood specimens obtained for local safety assessments. Urine specimens and blood specimens were sent to the central laboratory to be assessed for efficacy analysis. So this was the protocol. It included a 15 weeks running phase, before which, after which randomization started. Follow-up period was at least 3 years, but it was stopped at 2 years due to the good results. It was prematurely terminated. Coming to the outcomes, it included primary, secondary, and tertiary outcomes. So the primary outcome was the first occurrence of progression of kidney disease or death from a cardiovascular cause. The progression of kidney disease was defined as ESRD, a sustained decrease in GFR less than 10 ml per minute, or a sustained decrease from baseline GFR of at least 40%, or a death from renal cause. The assessment of a sustained decrease used either the values measured at 2 consecutive scheduled follow-up visits at least 30 days apart. This was done because there is a tendency for AKI when we initiate SGLT2 inhibitors. So, a sustained decrease in GFR was confirmed by 2 consecutive samples at least 30 days apart. Secondary outcomes included time to first hospitalization for heart failure or cardiovascular death, occurrence of all-cause hospitalization, time to death from any cause. Other secondary outcomes include time to first occurrence of kidney disease progression, time to cardiovascular death, or ESRD. Tertiary efficacy assessments. Renal tertiary outcomes include time of 2 components of kidney disease progression. they also, as we know, there are some limitations whenever there is a composite primary outcome. So they divided it into renal tertiary outcomes, in which separated the ESRD component and also sustained decline of GFR component into two separate renal tertiary outcomes. And also they calculated the annual rate of change in GFR for both the groups separately. And they also measured the mortality-based tertiary outcomes, time to ESRD or death from any cause combined, time to kidney disease progression or death from any cause, and time to death from particular categories of causes, including cardiovascular and non-cardiovascular causes. There are also cardiovascular and metabolic tertiary outcomes, including time to major cardiovascular events or time to new onset diabetes mellitus, which was defined as based on either clinical criteria or HbA1c of more than 48 millimole per mole measured by central laboratory among participants without diabetes at baseline. Coming to the analysis, first occurrence of a primary outcome event among 1070 patients would provide a trial with 90% power with a two-sided p-value of 0.05 to detect a risk of primary outcome event that was 18% lower in the empagliflozin group than in the placebo group. And the protocol specified that a single formal interim analysis for efficacy would be conducted when 150 patients had a first occurrence of ESRD. All the analysis was performed according to intention to treat principle, which means that patients who left the protocol in between were excluded from the final analysis. Cox proportion hazard regression model with adjustment for baseline variables in the minimization algorithm was used to estimate the hazard ratio and 95% confidence interval for empagliflozin as compared with placebo. For tertiary and exploratory outcomes based on annual rate of change in GFR, the effects of empagliflozin treatment were analyzed with the use of shared parameter models. Coming to the results. The mean age of patients was comparable in both the groups, 63.9 in the empagliflozin group and placebo 63.8. Maximum number of patients were male. Female accounted for 33% in both the groups. Around 46% of patients in the empagliflozin group were diabetic, and 45.8% in the placebo group were diabetic. Majority of them were type 2 diabetes mellitus. 26% patient had a history of cardiovascular disease. The mean BMI was 29%. Mean GFR was 37.4 in the empagliflozin group and 37.3 in the placebo group. And if you see the distribution of the GFR in both the groups, around 34% of patients had a GFR of less than 30, which means that there was significant representation of lower GFR patients in this study. Also, the urine albumin creatinine ratio, the median was 331 in the EMPA group and 327 in the placebo group. And if we see the distribution, around 48%, if we add both of them, had a urine albumin creatinine ratio of less than 300, which again means that there was significant representation of patients, non-proteinuric patients in this study population. And 85.7% of patients were on a stable RAS inhibitor prescription before entering into the trial. So coming to the basic disease, diabetic kidney disease was present in 31% in both the groups, hypertensive or neurovascular disease in 21%, and glomerular disease in 25% in both the groups. So basically, both the groups were comparable at baseline. So coming to the primary outcomes. primary outcomes included progression of kidney disease or death from cardiovascular cause. This was a composite outcome which occurred in 13.1% of patients in the EMPA group and 16.9% of patients in the placebo group, which gives a hazard value of 0.72 for the primary composite outcome and a p-value of less than 0.01. Important to note here was in secondary outcomes, hospitalization from any cause was significantly lower in EMPA group as compared to the placebo group. However, hospitalization for heart failure or death from cardiovascular causes was not significantly different in both the group. Also, if we compare the secondary outcomes in which there was progression of kidney disease, death from cardiovascular causes, they were significantly less in patients who were on empagliflozin with a hazard ratio of 0.71 and 0.84 for death from cardiovascular causes. And if we compare the adverse effects are comparable. Important to note here is if we see the serious AKI in both the groups, it was around 3.2 in the EMPA group and 4.1 in the placebo group. So placebo group had actually more AKI episodes than the EMPA group. Serious AKI episodes than the EMPA group. Serious AKI was defined as which required intervention in the trial because most of these patients after starting SGLT2 had a decline in GFR for the first 2 months. We will see in the subsequent slides. Even other side effects like ketoacidosis and bone fracture and severe hypoglycemia were comparable in both the groups. Only lower limb amputation was numerically more common in EMPA group as compared to placebo group, but not statistically significant. So this figure compares the rate of the occurrence of first composite outcome in the EMPA group versus the placebo group. It was significantly lower with a hazard ratio of 0.72. This forest plot compares patients on empagliflozin versus placebo, and they have done a subgroup analysis based on presence or absence of diabetes, based on the eGFR, based on the albumin to creatine ratio. So, irrespective of the subgroup, all the patients showed benefit with EMPA. However, the benefit was better seen more in patients with diabetes as compared to those who did not have diabetes. Patients with albumin to creatine ratio more than 300 had better response, but nevertheless, patients with less proteinuria also showed benefits with empagliflozin. So they also compared eGFRs in both the groups. As we can see, initially the yellow line represents GFR with empagliflozin. There was a drop in GFR in the first 2 months in the empagliflozin, but subsequently the GFR stabilized over 2 years. So if we see the long-term total GFR, it was 1.37 more mean GFR in EMPA group as compared to the placebo group. So patients with a wide range of GFRs, level of albuminuria and cause of CKD, empagliflozin led to a risk of reduction in the risk of progression of kidney disease or death from cardiovascular cause that was 28% lower than with placebo, with no major safety concerns. And treatment with empagliflozin was effective regardless of diabetes status and was effective in patients with a broad range of eGFR down to approximately 20 ml per minute. And this trial adds substantially to the existing evidence by showing consistent benefits among 54% patients without diabetes and separately to 34.5% patients with an eGFR of less than 30 ml per minute. And the problem with the study was, despite the enrollment of 48.3% patients with the albumin to creatine ratio of less than 300, there was limited number of primary events, probably because the rate of progression of CKD will be lower because the proteinuria was lower in these patients, and annual rate of change in GFR showed that which is surrogate of progression of kidney disease, showed that empagliflozin slowed the rate of long-term GFR decline among patients with a albumin to create ratio of less than 300 at baseline. So the strength of the study was, it was a large size and it included broad eligibility criteria, the level of adherence to the trial regimen, and almost complete follow-up of all the patients. Meta-analysis previously have shown that SGLT2 inhibitors lowered the risk of death from cardiovascular cause by 14% and lowered the risk of hospitalization for heart failure by 23%. But the limitations include the lower than expected number of cardiovascular events, which reduce the statistical power for assessment of secondary and tertiary cardiovascular outcomes. So to conclude, patients with CKD who were at risk for disease progression, including a large number of patients without diabetes, with an eGFR less than 30 ml and with a lower albumin to create ratio, empagliflozin treatment led to a lower risk of progression of kidney disease or death from cardiovascular causes. Thank you.
I recently came across a tweet, and it was, there are three things which are certain in life. One is death, one is taxes, and third one is positive SGLT2 inhibitor trials. So it has become that predictable and boring. And every time you have a 30% improvement in the relative risk of getting progression of kidney disease and cardiovascular outcomes. Only one thing is that in this particular trial, they didn't see the benefit in the cardiovascular death or heart failure thing. So you comment on that, anything?
Combined cardiovascular composite outcome was better, sir. If they compared the separate hospitalization from cardiovascular cause, that was not different. But the death from cardiovascular cause, they were significantly lower in the EMPA group, sir.
No, if they have seen just the death from cardiovascular cause,
yes, sir,
separately, like the second endpoint that you showed,
that's what they said.
that was not significantly different. But if they take it as a composite,
yes, sir,
then only that benefit was
yes,
seen.
yes, sir.
So that was a bit different from the previous trial, where like in all the trials previously, every time the death was less in EMPA group, cardiovascular or heart failure admissions and all.
Probably that is because of the lesser number of cardiac events, because these patients have lower albumin to create ratio at baseline. So they are naturally at lesser risk of cardiovascular events as compared to patients who were enrolled in credence and DAPA CKD problems.
Maybe because they had higher proteinuria.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And also I think maybe because less number of diabetics, that could be a reason. We have 50% diabetes now.
Just wanted to know about this declining GFR or rising creatinine, how they handled and how much was acceptable for them to continue in the trial?
They mentioned supplementary that around 20% they had accepted as they will continue the drug if it is 20%. If it goes beyond 20%, they discontinue the drug.
20% dropping rate.
Yeah, yes. And the same was seen in the trial itself. Initially there was a dip of 20%, then it stabilized over time, over 2 years. It improved. Yes.
And what happened to those who were excluded because of dropping rate?
No, there was a very small number of those patients. Yes, yes. And they also did not stop ACE inhibitors, ARBs when the GFR dropped.
They just continued.
They just continued.
I think the interesting thing also is the shifting in the goalpost, and now you have a GFR of 20 that you're talking about here. So, and the KDO guidelines till now was saying 30, you should more than 30 you use this drug. But now with these kind of studies, I think it's just a matter of time when and dialysis will be using this drug.
Too good to have.
So I got the impression that the benefit was more with patients who had proteinuria not more than 300. Is that correct?
No, sir. This is the more than 300 the benefit was better.
So higher the proteinuria, better is the benefit.
But nevertheless, there was benefit in low proteinuria also.
So what was that criticism that said about? Can we go back to that criticism slide?
Limitations.
Limitation.
So basically, it included around 35% of patients who had less proteinuria, So the primary outcomes, the primary events which they were expecting, that were lower because of the lesser number of patients with less.
So they were less.
The population was not very much at risk of cardiovascular events.
And neither progression as well.
Yes.
Because if they have lesser proteinuria, I think the follow-up duration will be shorter. I think. But as you said, there is a tendency towards improvement which was seen. If you look at the annual fall in GFR, what they are seeing. So maybe if it was for a longer duration, the benefit would have come.
No, sir. That is just right on the right side of this less than 30, yes, sir. But the number of patients less than 30 are very less, sir. Most of them were 3,300 in that range, sir. 300.
There were some type 1 diabetic patients also.
Yes, sir.
Till now we were just under the impression that probably we should be using SGLT2 inhibitors for type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
Very small number of patients.
Let me give the incidence of ketoacidosis. I mean that 6 patients had ketoacidosis, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean among them, how many were in the type 1 diabetes group? Because I mean usually that's the reason why people are scared to start in these subsets.
No, sir. I'm not aware, sir.
So the number is small.
How many patients had fallen GFR in that study?
Number they have not mentioned.
Not mentioned.
No, ma'am. They just did analysis of total mean GFR of the patients who were on EMPA and mean GFR on placebo, and they compared. So they found what they found is 20% fall in GFR in patients mean GFR of those EMPA group within first 2 months, and it stabilized over time.
So nobody required dialysis or
No.
anything.
Yeah. They did not serious AKI actually were more in the placebo group. So we are not sure whether it actually prevents against serious AKI, and this is just a functional drop in GFR.
So for time also they have not stopped it. They continued.
Yes.
And then stabilized.
20%, if it is less than 20%, they continue to the third. Yes.
Even basically they have not stopped it.
What are the percent of discontinuation? They are not
Yes.
Very small number.
Yes.
Exclusion of polycystic kidney
Yes. Sir, probably because it will cause increased natriuresis that can lead to, and dialysis also it can cause. So that might lead to increased vasopressin, and that might increase the cyst sizes probably. That might be the reason why they have to increase indications.
previously, the also did include
That was only in patients with type 2 diabetes with a known atherosclerotic event and GFR more than 60. Only those were excluded, ma'am. Patients who already had a cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes.
So UTI was not more.
No, no, sir.
Genital infections was not more.
No, sir. Only what they said is numerically, number-wise, lower limb amputation was more, sir. That too was not significant because the numbers as such were low to compare statistically.
So this severe genital infection.
Only one patient, both the
Percentage you say?
Sir.
0.02 is percentage?
number of events. So one patient in both the groups. So that's what the events were very less. But that number of patients are 6609 total. So in that 6 patients.
Yes, but comparatively the genital infections which they say have happened.
transplant. I think it's very useful in studies.
Thank you, Dr. Kapil. I would now request our chairpersons to felicitate our speaker, Dr. Kapil. Now request Dr. Balasan to felicitate our chairperson. Thank you, chairpersons. Thank you, audience. And thank you, team of JP Chemicals. I will now request all of you to join for the